There. It hurts, she whispered. The rancher stopped cold and did what no one expected. The sun bled over the desert ridge as Jack Tanner rode home, reins loose in his hand, silence pressing against his chest like a stone. The land looked as tired as he felt, dust curling in the wind, the horizon fading into the red of a dying day. Since his wife passed 2 winters ago, everything seemed quieter, emptier. Even the wind had stopped singing. Then came a sound, faint, cracked, carried on the dry air. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. This story gets much more intense, and I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. It hurts. Jack froze. His hand went to the revolver at his hip. Out here, a voice like that could mean 100 things. A trap, a ghost, or someone clinging to their last breath. He listened again. The sound came from the ravine below. A woman's voice. Weak, pleading. He guided his horse down the slope, careful, scanning the brush. When he found her, she was half buried in dust, wrists scraped raw, a blood-dark stain spreading down her side. Her eyes fluttered open, wide with fear. "Don't touch me," she gasped, clutching her ribs. Jack crouched beside her anyway. "You're bleeding bad. Let me help." She tried to push him away, but had no strength left. He tore a strip from his shirt and pressed it to her wound. She winced, biting down hard to stop a scream. "Who did this to you?" he asked quietly. Her answer came in a breath that trembled like wind through broken glass. "Men from your town. Dust Creek." Jack's jaw tightened. He knew Dust Creek too well. Its saloon, its sheriff, its kind of justice. He looked around for tracks. Nothing. Whoever had done this made sure she'd never make it back alive. "What's your name?" "Lena," she said. "And if you're smart, you'll ride away." He could have. He should have. But Jack Tanner had a curse. He never turned from ghosts, even when they weren't his. He lifted her onto his horse and headed toward his cabin. The wind whispered through the sage, low and warning, but he didn't stop. By nightfall, rain rolled in, pounding the roof of his small cabin. Jack worked by lamplight, stitching Lena's wound as she trembled. Not just from pain, something deeper, like fear carved in her bones. "They said I stole from them," she whispered between thunderclaps. "Gold, maybe. I didn't." Her eyes flicked to his. "They said they'd make an example out of me." Jack's stomach turned. He knew what the men of Dust Creek did when they wanted to make a point. "Who sent them?" he asked. "Sheriff Dugan. Him and his men." That name hit harder than any bullet. Dugan had once been Jack's partner, back before greed and blood split them apart. He didn't say a word, just tightened the stitches and poured whiskey on the wound. She screamed, then went still. Days passed. Lena's color came back, but something changed in the air between them. Jack caught her staring more than once at the old chest near his bed, the one that held a tarnished badge and yellowed, wanted posters from another life. One night, as the fire burned low, she spoke softly, eyes on the flickering light. "You used to wear one, didn't you?" He said nothing. "That's why you helped me," she continued. "Because you still believe there's good left in people." She was wrong. Jack Tanner didn't believe in good anymore, just in debts, and his had come due a long time ago. The next morning, he found boot prints near the barn. Fresh ones. And an hour later, a bullet punched through his door. The past had caught his scent. He loaded his rifle and watched the horizon, where storm clouds gathered again, black as judgment. He didn't know yet that by sundown, Dust Creek would burn, and redemption would come dressed in gunpowder and blood. Rain still fell hard the next morning, turning the dirt outside Jack's cabin into a patchwork of mud and hoof prints. The sound was steady, almost peaceful, but inside, something restless stirred. Jack moved quietly, checking his rifle, setting the coffee to boil, trying not to wake Lena. She slept on his cot, her breathing uneven, her brow damp with fever. For a man who hadn't cared much whether he lived or died these past years, it was strange how much her being alive suddenly mattered. When she stirred, her voice was soft, almost a whisper. "You don't have to stay." Jack didn't look up from the fire. "You'd be dead by now if I hadn't." "That's not what I meant," she said, sitting up slowly, hand pressed to her side. "You don't owe me anything." He poured her a cup of coffee and handed it to her. "Maybe not, but I owe myself a reason to do something right. She took the mug, her eyes searching his face. You don't even know me. He looked away, jaw tight. Don't have to. Silence filled the small room, broken only by the rain tapping the window. Lena looked around, the rifle over the door, the old saddle by the wall, the empty frame where a photo used to be. She was your wife? Wasn't she? She asked gently. Jack's shoulders stiffened. He didn't answer right away. She died 2 winters back. Fever took her fast. I'm sorry, Lena said quietly. He nodded once, the motion tight, controlled. You and me both. They didn't talk for a long while after that. The fire hissed, the coffee cooled, and the storm outside grew louder, as if trying to drown the quiet between them. By afternoon, Lena tried to stand. Her legs trembled, but she pushed through it. I can't stay here, she said. If Dugan finds me, he will. Jack cut in, and if you walk out that door, you won't make it a mile. Her eyes flashed with anger. You think I'm some helpless thing? I think you're hurt and scared, he said, voice calm but firm. And I've seen what that does to people. For a moment, she just stood there, breathing hard, then sat back down, her expression cracking. I didn't lie about the gold, she said softly. They just needed someone to blame. Jack didn't respond. He'd heard enough confessions to know that truth and guilt often shared the same face. As night fell again, the wind carried distant thunder, but this time it wasn't the sky. It was hooves. Jack's pulse jumped. He stepped to the window, lifted the curtain just an inch. Through the rain, he saw them. 3 riders moving slow, deliberate. Dugan's men. He turned to Lena. They found you. She went pale. Then they'll kill you too. Jack grabbed his rifle. Wouldn't be the first to try. He moved with quiet purpose, loading shells, checking the porch lantern, counting the seconds between thunder and silence. Lena watched him, something like guilt flickering in her eyes. Why are you doing this? She asked suddenly. Jack looked at her, rain dripping off his hat brim. Because if I don't, no one else will. When the first shot cracked through the night, it shattered more than the cabin window. It broke whatever line Jack Tanner had drawn between his past and now. He returned fire fast, precise, the kind of shooting that came from long years of being something he swore he'd never be again. The gunfight was short, brutal, echoing through the rain-soaked hills. 2 men down, 1 wounded and fleeing. When the smoke cleared, Jack stood in the doorway, soaked and breathing heavy. Lena stepped out behind him, clutching a blanket around her shoulders. Her eyes widened at the sight of the fallen men. They won't stop, she said, voice trembling. Dugan won't forgive this. Jack looked at the horizon, where lightning split the sky. Then he can ride out here himself. Lena stared at him, something breaking in her voice. You're not doing this for me, are you? He turned toward her, eyes tired but honest. No, I'm doing it because I've run from too many things already. Outside, thunder rolled again, and for the first time in years, Jack Tanner didn't feel like a man waiting to die. He felt alive, standing on the edge of something he couldn't name. Mercy, vengeance, or maybe redemption. The storm had passed by dawn, leaving the ground soaked and the air heavy with the smell of wet earth and gunpowder. Jack stood outside, boots sinking into the mud, staring at the bodies lying still by the fence. He didn't say a word. He just watched the steam rise off the cold skin of men he used to drink beside. Once they'd shared laughter. Now they shared nothing but silence. Lena came to the doorway, wrapping a shawl tight around her shoulders. Her face was pale, her eyes glassy from the night before. You should bury them, she said quietly. Jack nodded once. I will. He didn't look at her as he worked. He dug shallow graves just beyond the barn, one after another, until the sweat mixed with the rain still clinging to his hair. Each strike of the shovel felt like penance, not for killing, but for what he'd become comfortable doing again. When he was done, he stood over the mounds for a long time, then whispered something only the wind could carry away. Inside, Lena sat by the fire, staring into the flames as if they held some kind of truth. When Jack walked in, she didn't speak. She just handed him a cup of coffee with trembling fingers. They were after gold, he said finally, but they weren't carrying any maps or notes. Lena hesitated, then whispered, because it's not about gold anymore. It's about silence. Jack frowned. What do you mean? They think I know something, she said, her voice low, like a confession. About Dugan. About what he did years ago with a man who vanished. Your name came up too. He froze. The coffee burned his throat as he swallowed hard. You're saying Dugan's still chasing ghosts? Not ghosts, she said. Loose ends. Jack's jaw clenched. He'd buried that past deep under lies and dust, hoping it would rot there. But now it was clawing its way back to life. You're not telling me everything, he said. Lena looked down. Because you wouldn't believe me if I did. Try me. She lifted her gaze, eyes wet but steady. I was supposed to find you. The words landed like a gunshot. What? They sent me, she said, voice trembling. They said you had something Dugan wanted, something that could ruin him. They didn't tell me what it was, only that I had to earn your trust and bring it back. Jack stepped back, every muscle in his body tightening. So you lied. I didn't plan to, she whispered. Not after you saved me. He laughed under his breath, but it wasn't humor. It was disbelief, bitter and hollow. You're telling me the men I just buried came here because of you. Her voice cracked. Yes. The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. Only the crackle of the fire dared to speak. Jack's hands trembled as he set down his mug. He walked to the window, staring out at the horizon, where morning sunlight touched the wet sand. You brought hell right to my door, he said quietly. I didn't mean to, she said, tears streaking down her face. They said they'd kill me if I didn't do it. Jack turned, his expression unreadable. Then maybe you should have let them. She flinched like he'd struck her. You don't mean that. He didn't answer. The truth was, he didn't know what he meant anymore. Minutes passed. Then, softer this time, he said, pack your things. She looked at him, startled. What? You're leaving at sundown, he said. You'll ride north through the pass. You'll keep going till you hit the river. After that, you're on your own. Her lips parted, but no words came. She wanted to fight, to explain, but the look in his eyes stopped her. It wasn't anger. It was something worse. Disappointment. She nodded slowly. Okay. Jack walked to the chest near his bed and opened it. Inside lay a revolver wrapped in a worn piece of cloth, a badge blackened with time, and a folded letter yellowed at the edges. He stared at them for a long time, then took out the badge and set it on the table. Lena watched him. You were a lawman once, she said quietly. Once, he replied, and I was stupid enough to think it meant something. He walked past her toward the door. If I'm not back by sundown, you ride anyway. Where are you going? She asked. To end something I should have ended a long time ago. Then he stepped out into the sunlight, the door closing behind him like the sound of a verdict. Jack rode into Dust Creek under a blue sky. The streets were quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that came before trouble. His boots hit the ground heavy, each step echoing through the dirt like a drumbeat of memory. Every building he passed looked smaller than he remembered, though maybe it wasn't the town that had changed. Maybe it was him. The saloon's door creaked when he pushed it open. Inside, the air smelled of whiskey, smoke, and old regrets. Sheriff Walt Dugan sat at a corner table, cards spread before him, hat tipped low. When he looked up, that grin came, cold, slow, poisonous. Well, I'll be damned, Dugan said, voice smooth as oil. Didn't think I'd see you crawl back here, Tanner. Jack didn't sit. You sent your men to my place. 3 of them are dead. Dugan leaned back in his chair, unbothered. Then they should have shot straighter. Jack's jaw tightened. Why, Walt? What's this all about? Dugan chuckled. Still playing the honest man, huh? You think you can wash the dirt off your hands just 'cause you quit wearing the badge. I didn't quit, Jack said. I walked away before I became what you did. Dugan's grin faded. You always thought you were better than me. No, Jack said quietly. I just stopped pretending I wasn't part of the rot. For a long moment, neither man moved. The piano player in the corner stopped mid-song, sensing the air grow heavy. Then Dugan said, that woman, Lena, she's got something that don't belong to her. She's got scars you gave her, Jack shot back. Dugan smirked. She stole my gold. Your gold. Jack laughed under his breath. You mean the stash from Red Canyon? The one we were supposed to turn in before you shot the guard and ran with it? A flicker of something crossed Dugan's eyes. Recognition, then anger. You should have kept your mouth shut about that. Jack stepped closer, voice low but sharp. You killed an innocent man, Walt. I buried that secret once. I won't bury it again. Dugan rose, hand brushing the revolver at his belt. You think you're some hero now? You're just an old ghost in a dead town. Jack met his gaze, steady and cold. Maybe, but a ghost don't bleed. The air snapped. Both men drew. The sound of hammers cocking filled the silence like thunder waiting to fall. Before either could fire, the saloon doors swung open. Lena stood there, soaked from rain, face pale but eyes fierce. Stop, she shouted. Jack froze. What the hell are you doing here? I couldn't leave, she said, voice trembling but clear. You think you're ending this for me? You're not. You're ending it for yourself. Dugan laughed, rough and cruel. Well, look who showed up. The bait. Lena ignored him. She looked at Jack, her eyes pleading. You told me once mercy wasn't weakness. Prove it. Jack's hand trembled on his gun. For a heartbeat, the world went silent. Just him, her, and the weight of everything unsaid between them. Then Dugan sneered. You're gonna listen to her? She's been lying since the day you found her half dead in the dirt. Lena's chin lifted. I lied because I was scared. But you? You lie because you like it. Dugan's face twisted. You should have stayed buried. He moved first, a flicker of motion, a spark of steel, but Jack was faster. The gunshot tore through the room, echoing like thunder off canyon walls. Dugan's body hit the table, cards scattering like snow. The saloon went still. Only the clock on the wall dared to keep ticking. Jack lowered his weapon, breathing hard. Lena's hands shook as she stepped forward. It's over, she whispered. Jack looked down at Dugan's body, then at the gun in his hand. His voice came rough, heavy with something between sorrow and relief. No, it ain't. It never really is. He walked past her, out into the street. The rain had started again, soft but steady. Lena followed him, tears mixing with the water on her cheeks. You saved me, she said quietly. He stopped, didn't turn. No, you saved me, from believing I was too far gone to care. For the first time in years, his words carried a kind of peace, broken but real. Behind them, lightning cracked over Dust Creek. The town finally had its reckoning. But Jack Tanner's wasn't done yet. The night stretched over Dust Creek like a dark blanket, heavy and endless. The storm had blown out, leaving only the smell of smoke and rain-soaked dirt. Jack Tanner stood alone outside the saloon, his hat pulled low, watching the lightning fade beyond the ridge. Dugan's blood had mixed with the mud, and though the man was gone, his shadow still clung to the town like rot underwood. Behind him, Lena lingered in the doorway, pale in the lamplight. She didn't speak right away, maybe because she knew there was nothing left to say that wouldn't hurt. Finally, she whispered, You didn't have to kill him. Jack didn't turn. You're wrong. I had to. Some things don't end until someone stops pretending they will. She stepped closer, her boots squelching in the wet dirt. You think that made you right? He looked at her, eyes tired but steady. No, but made him wrong for the last time. Lena shook her head, tears cutting through the grime on her face. That's not justice, Jack. That's just another grave. He stared at her for a long moment, then said quietly, maybe justice is just a fancy word for revenge that feels right. She didn't argue. The truth in his voice was too raw to touch. Instead, she asked, What happens now? He exhaled, slow and heavy. Now, you get on that horse. You ride north like I told you. You start over somewhere that don't remember your name. What about you? I'll stay, he said. This town needs to remember what it's done. Someone has to bury the past proper. Her eyes softened. And who's going to bury you? A small smile tugged at his mouth. I reckon the wind'll do just fine. She wanted to argue, but the look in his eyes said he'd already made peace with whatever came next. The following morning, Lena packed what little she had. Jack's old saddlebag, a flask, a few coins. When she turned to say goodbye, she found him out by the barn, hammering boards over a shattered window. His movements were slow, deliberate, like every nail was keeping something from breaking loose inside him. She approached quietly. I meant what I said last night. You don't have to do this. He didn't stop working. Yeah, I do. Dugan might be gone, but his men ain't. They'll come looking. And if they find you here, it all starts over. Lena hesitated. Then come with me. Jack paused, hammer midair. I ain't built for peace anymore. Don't say that. He finally looked at her, eyes glinting under the early sun. You think what's left of me can walk into a quiet town, buy a house, live like none of this happened? That ain't me, Lena. I'd poison whatever place I touched. She stepped closer, voice breaking. You're wrong. You still know what mercy feels like. That's more than most men around here ever did. For the first time, something in Jack's face softened. Not much, but enough to see the man he once was flicker back to life. He brushed a thumb over the edge of his hat, then said, You remember that chest by my bed? She nodded. Inside, there's a letter. Take it. Don't open it till you cross the river. What's in it? He half smiled. My confession. If anyone comes after you, show it to the marshal. He'll know what to do. Lena's voice dropped to a whisper. You're planning something. Jack gave no answer. When the sun climbed high, Lena mounted the horse he'd saddled for her. She looked down at him one last time. You don't have to be alone, Jack. He looked up, squinting against the light. I've been alone long before you rode into that desert. Don't make it harder than it has to be. Tears welled in her eyes, but she nodded. If I make it out there, I'll build something better. For both of us. He tipped his hat. Then that'll be enough. She rode off slow at first, then faster, until the dust swallowed her whole. Jack watched her go, the sound of hooves fading into silence. He stood there long after she vanished, listening to nothing but the wind. When he turned back toward the cabin, his eyes caught the faint shimmer of something on the horizon. Movement. Riders. More than a few. He muttered under his breath. So it begins. Jack Tanner went inside, shut the door, and started loading dynamite from the crate beneath the floorboards. He'd been ready for this for a long, long time. The wind howled through Dust Creek that evening, carrying dust and whispers from a world that had already moved on. Jack Tanner sat by the table, his rifle laid out in pieces, each one polished clean, his movements slow and sure. The lamp flickered, throwing long shadows across the walls, ghosts of men he used to be. Outside, thunder rumbled. But it wasn't the sky this time. It was hooves. He looked toward the window, jaw tight. Took you long enough, he muttered. A dozen riders were coming down the ridge, dark figures against the setting sun. He could tell by their formation, Dugan's men, or what was left of them, wolves without a leash. Jack stood, slid bullets into the rifle's chamber, then strapped the gun belt tight around his waist. His reflection in the dusty mirror looked like a man carved from the same grit he'd spent his life fighting. He whispered, half to himself, No running this time. Then from outside, a voice shouted through the wind, hard, taunting. Jack Tanner, you think killing the sheriff makes you the law now? Jack opened the door slowly, stepped out onto the porch. The dying sun painted everything red. The ground, the sky, even the men aiming guns at him. I ain't the law, he said calmly. Just the man cleaning up the mess it left behind. A tall rider at the front spat into the dirt. You think you're some kind of hero? Jack shook his head. No, heroes die for what's right. I already died for what's wrong. The men shifted, uneasy. Even killers could feel when death was near, and Jack Tanner wore it like a second skin. The leader sneered. You talk tough for a man outnumbered. Jack's voice dropped, low and steady. Outnumbered don't mean outgunned, and it sure as hell don't mean I'm scared. He cocked the rifle, the click echoing sharp in the dry air. But I'll give you one chance. Turn around. Go home. You walk away now, and maybe you get to see another sunrise. The man laughed, but there was no humor in it. You're bluffing. Jack took one slow step forward. Try me. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then the leader raised his hand, and hell broke loose. Gunfire exploded through the valley, bullets tearing into the porch, shattering wood, splintering glass. Jack ducked behind a post and returned fire, each shot measured, deliberate. Men fell one by one, their screams lost to the thunder of gunpowder. Inside the cabin, the lamp toppled, flames licking the floorboards. Smoke thickened fast. Jack reloaded, coughed, and fired again through the haze. A bullet grazed his shoulder, another tore through his sleeve, but he didn't stop. Then he heard it, the unmistakable sound of a fuse hissing. He turned, eyes catching the spark running toward the crate by the wall. The dynamite. He froze for half a second, then grabbed the burning fuse and yanked it free. The spark died, but the danger didn't. He looked around the room. The old photos, the worn saddle, the badge glinting faintly in the dirt. Everything he'd ever been, right there ready to burn. Through the doorway came a voice, deep, angry, desperate. "You can't stop us all, Tanner. Dugan's gone, but his gold still ain't yours." Jack stepped into the open, blood on his sleeve, smoke curling behind him like wings. "You want the gold?" he shouted. "Then come take it from a dead man." He raised the rifle and fired again, his voice cutting through the chaos. "You killed for greed. I'll die for peace. That's the difference." Bullets cracked around him, tearing through the boards, but he didn't flinch. He fired until the rifle clicked empty, then tossed it aside and drew his revolver. When the dust settled, only two men remained standing, Jack and the tall rider. Both breathing hard, both bleeding. The man spat blood, sneering. "You think this makes you clean? You're just like us." Jack smiled faintly, breath shallow. "Yeah, maybe. But I learned the difference between being dirty and staying that way." He looked back at the cabin, flames crawling up the walls now, devouring everything. Then his gaze dropped to the porch, where the fuse he'd torn lay coiled near the dynamite. His voice softened. "Guess it's time to finish it." The last gunman frowned. "What the hell are you?" Jack's finger tightened on the revolver. One shot. The spark lit the fuse. The man's eyes went wide. Jack gave a tired half-smile. "Tell Dugan I finally kept my word." He stepped back into the doorway, smoke curling around him, and whispered, "For her." Then the world erupted. The explosion tore through the cabin, flames roaring high into the sky, the sound echoing across Dust Creek like thunder from a dying god. When the dust cleared, nothing remained but ashes drifting in the wind, and the faint scent of gunpowder and mercy. The blast had echoed for miles. By the time Lena reached the ridge, the sky above Dust Creek burned orange, smoke twisting into the fading light like a prayer that never reached heaven. She pulled hard on the reins, her horse whinnying beneath her, trembling at the smell of ash. The cabin was gone. Nothing left but blackened timbers and the faint hiss of cooling embers. She slid off the saddle, her boots sinking into the scorched earth. The air was thick, heavy with smoke, dust, and the kind of silence that hurt to breathe. "Jack!" Her voice cracked as she said his name. She moved through the ruins, searching for anything that might have survived. A trace, a sign, a miracle. But there was nothing. The porch was gone, the roof blown apart, the world around it quiet as a graveyard. Her hand shook as she dropped to her knees near the wreckage, sifting through the ash. Then her fingers brushed something cold, metal, scorched, but whole. She pulled it out slowly. Jack's badge, blackened, half-melted, but still there. Tears welled in her eyes, falling into the dirt. She whispered, "You stubborn fool." Behind her, a voice broke the silence. "Ma'am." She turned sharply. A man on horseback had stopped a few yards away, a star pinned to his chest. He looked at the wreckage with a grim kind of respect. "Heard the blast from town. What happened here?" Lena clutched the badge tight in her hand. "Justice," she said softly. "The kind no court ever gives." The marshal dismounted, scanning the ruins. "Name's Carter. We found Dugan dead yesterday. Word was Tanner might have been mixed up in it." She looked up at him, eyes fierce despite the tears. He didn't start it. He just finished what everyone else was too afraid to. Carter studied her, then nodded. He was a lawman once. He still was, she said, right up till the end. For a moment, neither spoke. The wind picked up, carrying the faintest sound through the air, maybe the shifting boards, maybe something else. Lena closed her eyes and could almost hear his voice again, calm, steady, always a little sad. "You'll live. That's what matters." When she opened them, the marshal was holding out his hand. "Come with me. I'll take you to town. Get you cleaned up, get a roof over your head." Lena shook her head. "No, I ain't leaving here yet." He hesitated. "Ma'am, there's nothing left." "There's something," she said quietly. "There has to be." She turned back toward the wreckage. Her gaze landed on a charred piece of wood lying half-buried in ash, the edge of the doorframe. It still had the faint carving she'd seen him make weeks ago, when the nights had been quiet and the world had still felt fixable. He'd carved a single word into it: mercy. Her lips trembled as she traced the letters with her fingertips. The word felt alive somehow, like it was still breathing beneath the ruin. Finally, she stood, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. "I'll come with you," she said. As the marshal helped her onto his horse, she looked back one last time. The smoke was thinning now, drifting east with the wind. Somewhere in it, she swore she could still hear him. Faint, rough, like the whisper of an old promise. "You can live, right?" Her throat tightened. She whispered to the wind, "I will." The marshal said nothing as they rode away. But as they reached the ridge, he glanced at her and asked, "What'll you do now?" She looked out at the valley below, wide, quiet, and waiting. "I'll rebuild," she said. Not for him, for what he believed in before the world broke him. The marshal nodded slowly. Good folks are rare these days. Sounds like he was one. Lena smiled faintly through the ache. He wasn't perfect, but he tried. That's more than most ever do. As they rode on, the setting sun caught the last plume of smoke rising from the valley, turning it gold for a moment before it vanished into the evening sky. And though she didn't look back again, she carried the weight of that place in her heart. The rancher who saved a liar, and in doing so, saved himself. Years later, the valley had changed. The burned land had grown green again, wildflowers pushing through the dirt where ash once lay. A new fence lined the edge of the rebuilt ranch, its wood clean and strong, sunlight catching on the letters carved into the gate, Tanner Ranch. Lena stood there one quiet morning, the wind brushing through her hair. She wore his old hat now, the brim weathered and bent. The world had moved on, but Dust Creek still whispered his name like a secret the land refused to forget. Behind her, a young boy came running from the barn, laughter echoing through the open field. "Ma, the colt's up on his feet." She smiled, wiping her hands on her apron. "Told you he'd make it." The boy grinned, his face bright, full of a kind of hope Jack never got to see again. She watched him go, her heart heavy and warm at once. Life, fragile, stubborn life, always found a way. The marshal still came by sometimes, older now, slower, but always respectful. This morning, he rode up the trail as the sun climbed higher. "Morning, Lena," he said, tipping his hat. She nodded. "Morning, Marshal." He looked around the ranch, a faint smile on his weathered face. "You did good with the place. Hard to believe this was just ashes once." She glanced toward the distant ridge, her voice soft. "Ashes make good soil, if you give him time." The marshal dismounted, tying his horse to the post. "Town's talking again. They're saying what he did back then, about Dugan, about standing his ground. Folks finally see it for what it was. Not revenge, not madness, justice." Lena's gaze drifted to the wooden cross near the tree line. "Justice ain't always clean, Marshal. Sometimes it's got blood on its hands, but it still matters." He nodded. "He'd be proud of what you've built." She smiled faintly, eyes glistening. He already was. He just didn't know how to say it. The wind carried through the valley then, soft, warm, filled with the smell of sage and rain. For a moment, it almost sounded like a voice, low and distant, saying the words that started it all. "There it hurts." Lena closed her eyes, listening, not in sorrow this time, but in peace. "Yeah," she whispered, "it did. But it was worth it." The marshal waited quietly as she laid a small bouquet of wildflowers at the base of the wooden cross. The badge, still scorched, rested beside it, a symbol of everything Jack Tanner once was and everything he'd finally become. She looked up at the sky, where the clouds drifted slow and gold in the morning light. "He used to think mercy was weakness," she said softly. "But mercy's what saved him in the end. Not from death, from himself." The marshal smiled. "Guess he found his peace." She nodded. "And maybe I found mine." They stood there a while longer, neither speaking, letting the wind tell the rest of the story. As the marshal mounted his horse to leave, Lena turned back toward the ranch. The boy was by the corral now, calling out, his laughter carrying through the air like music. She smiled. feeling the warmth of the sun on her face. When a marshal looked back one last time, he saw her standing tall, framed against the open sky, not as a ghost of what was lost, but as proof of what could still be found. And from somewhere deep within the valley, the sound of the wind seemed to whisper again, faint but certain. Mercy isn't weakness. It's the courage to do right when the world teaches you to turn away. That was the lesson Jack Tanner left behind, carved not in stone, but in the hearts of those who remembered him. The man who saved the liar who found truth, and the land that finally learned to forgive. Mercy isn't weakness. It's courage, the strength to do right even when it costs everything.